Hello and welcome to my live interview for Victorious Souls podcast this evening. Today I have a gentleman named Daniel Sih. Daniel Sih. I was so focused on saying his last name correctly, I used my own name. And here we go again with why I do these live, so you know that I'm a real person. And I care about you getting authentic information. We don't edit out the mistakes. This is just me. So Daniel comes to us all the way from Australia. He is a productivity expert who suffered burnout, but then he recovered himself from that. And he's going to be sharing his story with us today, along with his award-winning book, Spacemaker. And he has a consulting group that he co-founded. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Danielle Burnock from danielleburnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. So welcome with me, Daniel Sih.
Hi.
Hi, Daniel. I'm so sorry. I introduced and I called you Danielle at the beginning. Oh my goodness.
Well, it's a nice name, isn't it? So that's all right. I'm happy to be Danielle, but maybe Daniel for this interview. It's great to have, it's great to meet you again and be on the show.
Yeah, well, I had gone to your website. I was going to ask you how to pronounce your name and you had it on there, how to say it. It's C, right?
Yeah, like the ocean. It's pretty easy. Yeah.
Like the ocean. It's how I wrote it down because it's S-I-H, and I would have never guessed that's how to pronounce it. So I'm very glad you had that on there. At least I said your last name correctly.
Yeah, no, well done. I must admit, if I was in like some parts of China, you would call my name Daniel Sih, which sounds a bit more like a swear word. So we just keep it as C for Westerners. It's easy.
Yeah, or like you just sneezed.
Like I sneezed.
Well, I was telling them about how you suffered burnout and then you recovered yourself from that, and you have this book Spacemakers, and you're going to share your story, and you have co-founded a consulting group and everything. But before we get into all of that, tell us a little bit about Daniel, who you are and your family, where you live, and life before you got into all of this.
Yeah, so look, I live in Hobart, Tasmania. If you don't know where that is, there's an island at the bottom of Tasmania. Probably the next stop south would be Antarctica, and it's beautiful. It's like a small New Zealand with mountains, and it's cooler than other parts of Australia. You've probably heard of the Tasmanian Devil if you watch too many cartoons as a child, although they don't really spin around like they did on the Looney Tunes cartoon. So I live there. I'm married. I've been married 20 years this year, which is
Congratulations.
an achievement. So my wife is a nurse, and I met her when I was a physiotherapist or a physical therapist in the States. And so that was my first career, working in hospitals and working with orthopedics and treating elderly people, helping them get back on their feet. I have 3 children. So I have a 15-year-old, so the kind of the teenage years, and then 12 and 10-year-old boys. And they're pretty amazing. They are dressed up right now for book week. So they're dressed up as different characters in books, and they just kissed me goodbye. So yeah, it's been nice. Yeah.
What
and I live in community as well. They dressed up as a blue fairy. That was my daughter. I don't know what book that was. And my sons went as what's it called? A ranger. And another character, and my younger son is very creative, and he didn't want to use any of the books. That he just wanted to make his own character up. So he wrote a book called The Boy with the Hat, and he wore a hat and brought his own book. So he's like, it's in this book.
There you go. How creative. That is so cool. Wow. So when you struggled with burnout, when did that struggle happen to you? When did you tell us about that struggle?
Yeah, look, it's hard to pinpoint. Look, in terms of when I realized I was struggling with anxiety and burnout, it would have been 10 years ago. Yeah, about 10 years ago, slightly over. But even as a child, I was a fairly insecure child, and I had nervous twitches, and so I was probably a little prone to nervousness potentially. My family have mental health issues in our background, I suppose. So I've always been a bit aware that I need to be careful of my mental health because of my family heritage. But yeah, it probably wasn't until it was took about 3 months, I think, where I started to really feel like I was stretched and tired. I didn't feel what I would have called anxiety. It's more that I wasn't sleeping well. I was working too many hours. I just wasn't having very much fun, and just felt stretched across work and life. Yeah, which I suppose is pretty common for many of us.
So what made you feel like something was wrong?
Well, breathlessness for me, it was a physical thing. So I started to feel breathless before I spoke in front of a group, and I felt breathless when I was just having a busy day. And I thought that's really unusual because I'm relatively fit. So I was wondering what was wrong. And then eventually I started to feel breathless at the dinner table, and then even just I ran out of breath reading books to my kids, little picture books. And I'm like, well, this is hopefully not too stressful, this situation. Maybe there's something wrong with my body. And so I had all these tests, lung function tests and heart tests, which I'm thankful that I got to have them. And I'm also thankful that I wasn't physically unwell in that sense. But yeah, the doctor just said, I think it's your lifestyle and it's the way in which you're living, and I would call this anxiety. And so that was the first time I'd ever recognized anxiety in my life in that sense.
Wow, I was going to ask before you went into the doctor thing, it's like you would wonder if you're having all this trouble breathing that you jumped to the conclusion that maybe there was something physically wrong with you, but it was the internal manifesting on the external, and the doctor was really the one who pointed it out.
Yeah, and they're all connected, our mind, our body, our spirit. I mean, I think it's amazing how spiritual changes can change your physical body and vice versa. I've had those other experiences as well. But no, it was a wake up call, and really for the doctor, he heard about my lifestyle. So I was running 3 jobs at the time,
Oh,
and
wow.
so I
What jobs did you have?
I was a physical therapist, a physiotherapist, part time, leading a service of like 17 health sites. So it wasn't necessarily a small job. And then I'd started this hobby business, which is now Spacemakers. But we were just training people on the side to help manage their email inbox. We called it Email Ninja. And that was meant to be a hobby because I enjoyed helping people improve their productivity skills. But it was starting to ramp up, and I was really interested in it and really enjoying it, even though it paid no money. And at the same time, my church pastor left, and they needed someone to step in. And so I was actually asked to be, I suppose, a church pastor for that interim period. So completely different jobs as well.
Right. So that
And
sounds actually like 4 jobs.
yeah. Oh, and I had 3. Well, I had 2.
And
Well,
you were a
one or
husband
2 children at the
and are
time.
a husband and a dad. So you had like 6 jobs.
Yeah. So
No wonder you
one.
were having trouble breathing.
Yeah, lesson learned. Everyone. I have a fairly high capacity for managing complexity, but everyone has a limit, and it was a really important wake up call. The other actually wake up call was I had a friend who was actually a minister as well, who had breathing issues, and he had them about 9 or 10 months before, and I don't think he continued pushing through, and ended up basically in true burnout, where his body broke down and he needed to be in hospital, and he was off work for years after that, and never returned to his same capacity. And so it was actually, I'm really thankful I saw that in a close friend and realized, wow, I don't want to head down that path. And so I need to really take my health as a priority and not just do the guy thing, and push through and say it's going to be fine.
Or even as you had said in the beginning, before we started, how you're a type A. That's a very type A thing, to just push through. I mean, male or female. It's like, to just, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. Add something more, add something more, add something more.
Definitely. No, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's just in Australia, statistically, the guys are less likely to go to a doctor if they have a health issue than females. So I think as a very broad population trend, we need to take care of our health. Yeah.
No, I meant that both add more to the pile.
They all add up. Yeah, absolutely.
And I agree. Women do tend to go to the doctor quicker than men, but there's a lot of personality in there too. So
there's a lot of personality.
So what did you do when this happened after the doctor said that? Were you having any problems in your relationship, or was it just in your physical body?
Yeah, I'm very thankful. I mean, I've got a strong marriage. We've definitely had our rocky periods, but I
Oh,
think
you're
at that
human,
time,
right?
yeah, of course, yeah, 20 years. I mean, but at that point, I think we were in a good point. So, and my wife is very understanding and empathetic, and I think when she realized that I was unwell, I think I can't really remember. So, which is probably an indication that she was amazing. Uh, but I was when I've been overstressed, then I've been cranky and tired and not
Hmm.
present. What my wife would say is I'm usually quite a lighthearted. I'm playful is probably the word in the
Yeah.
family, and when I go through a period when I'm really working too hard or feeling near burnout or stressed, I lose that playfulness and I become more serious. And for her, that's an indication that I'm not as fun to be around and that I'm not as fun for the kids. And it's one of those early signs. And I think this is it. I think when most of us will wrestle with chronic health issues, whether it be mental health or physical health throughout our life. And part of the secret is having enough self-awareness to recognize the early signs and knowing what the strategies you need to kick into place are to mitigate going forward. And so I do that now, but one of those early signs for me now is when I stop making dad jokes and I'm too serious and don't laugh very much. Well, then it's time to look at how much I'm working.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pause here and just address the audience because I think this is a really important point I want you to get. Because Daniel's not the only person where this particular piece shows up. This loss of sense of humor, this loss of playfulness, this loss of the joy. So if you are suffering any of those in your life, I want you to take pause and really listen to what Daniel has to say and how you can help your life to get your sense of humor back, to get your joy back, to get your playfulness back. Because that's how we enjoy life. And we need that to enjoy life. Life is hard. We can't get around that. But we can find ways to have joy in the middle of it anyway. So then, what are some of the things that you did to take ownership of your life again when you had this wake up call at the doctor and the doctor's like, well, this is called anxiety. And you're like, oh, wow, I didn't really know that. What did you do to respond to that?
Yeah. And I think part of the anxiety, there were two things going on. One, I knew that I couldn't sustain it wasn't just three jobs, it was three careers at the same time. And so I
And
already
you're
knew
just
that,
one person, right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
I
just checking.
already I already knew that that wasn't healthy or sustainable. And I'd been wrestling with that. So I had the big questions of what do I do with my career? And then the second part of it is what I do with my personal habits. So I might separate them because I think they were both at play and they're both important in this situation. So in terms of the career, I mean, I was in this dilemma because I could see the wind changing. I could see that it was time to make a shift. And I had been a physiotherapist. Well, it was my first job. I'd been a physio for 10 years. I was senior in my career. I did my study through physiotherapy and it paid well. It was permanent. So it's hard to make a transition away from a career where you're quite established, particularly
Yeah.
when you have young kids, and I had a mortgage as well.
Oh, yeah.
And yet I just felt like my time had come, and it's more that I definitely wanted to continue in the management and leadership area rather than doing clinical work. But every time I stepped up into a senior job, it just became more paperwork and bureaucracy, and that's the way the government works. And it's not me. I'm very entrepreneurial. Even though I didn't know it, I wouldn't have used those terms at the time. And ministry is a passion. I'm a follower of Jesus, and I felt at that stage I really wanted to serve the church and contribute in that way. And yet, that's not a very lucrative job from a financial perspective. I think I was paid a day and a half a week to do like a lot more work than that. And then my business was really a hobby. I mean, we worked for the first 2 years. And at the end of every year at Christmas, we took our wives, it's a partnership, we took our wives out for dinner. And that was the entire pay we received for the year. So you can't really live on that. So it was this weird thing where I had this passion project, and yet I knew that my time was up with physio. And so that was hard. I had to make a call. And sometimes, these physical illnesses are a blessing because they force us to make the changes we know we need to make.
Mhm.
And I wasn't sure what it was until I had these two conversations. I'll be brief if that's okay, but I
Oh,
had a
Elaborate. That's good.
Okay. Okay. I had a conversation with my physio manager, and she was fantastic, one of the best people I've worked with. But she said, look, I can see that your heart isn't in this like it was. And obviously you're not in a great place, personally, but we don't want to lose you. So if you decide you need to change your role, you could drop down to a day a week. I'll keep you permanent, and you can basically do whatever you want to do using your creative skills and project skills, which is what I really love to use.
Wow.
And it's really nice of her, and that was really fantastic. But then she said, that way you'll be safe and secure if everything else doesn't work out. And she was being really kind, but I
Right.
had this gut visceral feeling, this intuition that it was almost like I just knew that the only reason I would stay in my physio career is because I was fearful,
Mm,
and because I wanted to be safe and secure. And from a faith and identity perspective, I'm like, no, I don't want to live like that. Like
yeah.
that shouldn't be how I make decisions. And I could see immediately that if I continued down that track, well, then in 20 years I'd be in a golden cage, and I'd have a safe and
Yeah.
secure job that I hated. So it was actually the thing that thrust me to resign entirely and give up my permanency and take the plunge. Uh, and the second thing is, about a week later, I had a coffee or a dinner with a friend, and he was a businessman who owned a consultancy, which is a bit like mine now, and he was quite successful. And so I wanted to get some mentoring, and I said to him, "Oh, Pete, I've made a decision. I'm going to quit my safe and secure job and take the plunge and be an entrepreneur." And I was expecting him to encourage me, and he looked me in the eye and he said, "That would be dumb."
Wow.
And I was like, oh, and it was another wake up call. And what he was saying, I've got a mortgage, I've got kids, and I'm going to be broke, and it's going to be super hard, and I'm going to have to work really hard, and I'm physically not that well at the moment. So how can you do this in a sensible way? And that was really helpful as well. So I ended up doing some part-time physio stuff, casually, made some changes with my church role. I still quit physio, and then I ended up bivocational for 10 years,
Mm,
part-time pastoring and part-time business. But yeah, they were the right decisions. And those two aha moments, for me, they were God moments, were like, okay, I know what I need to do. And that was unloading a whole lot of stuff in my life in order to move into the next stage and take it slower. So that's the big picture. Sometimes you actually need to make some hard calls if you really have a completely unsustainable work life, or
yeah.
you're in a job that you actually can't not work 50 hours a week or more. There comes a point where you just have to accept reality
Yeah.
and make a change at that big level.
Yeah. Wow. So what are some of the things that you did to bring about these changes? I mean, you talk in your communication with me before about, you talked about patterns and rhythms and things like that. Can you elaborate on some of that, of how you leaned into making the space for your life to go into
Mm.
this whole new direction?
Yeah, and that was the personal stuff, the texture of my life that needed to change. So I needed to change the big picture stuff because I couldn't find a way forward to be more sustainable and healthy in that environment. But yeah, then I got a mentor, and we started to work through, okay, how do I invest in a better lifestyle? And particularly in the end, I came to the conclusion that space is really precious, and there wasn't any margin or buffer in my life, which is why my business is called Spacemakers now, and my book is Spacemaker. It's about the value of space in the clutter of life, and to think and to rest, and particularly to invest in deep rest and deep thought and deeper relationships. And so I stumbled upon this idea. It's not a radical idea, but I didn't know it at the time, of predictable patterns or rhythms in my life, and the
Mm-hmm.
importance of creating a cadence to your life. Both, and it's a productivity skill for working well, but it's also one for resting well. And I ended up, over the next year, adding in healthier rhythms into my schedule, prioritizing space before work, and learning to have a slower, more steady, maybe not less, more steady, more considered, intentional way of living my life, individually and as a family unit. And that was such an important part of my recovery over that year. So an example, that a practical example, I started to take quarterly silent retreats and would have a day every quarter. So and I've been doing this for a decade, summer, autumn, winter, spring. I have a day by myself at the beach without devices, and I walk up and down the beach and I think and I pray and I write in my journal and I reflect on where I'm heading and where I want to go, so that I don't end up too quickly in a situation again where my life is very unsustainable and I haven't thought about the big picture. On a smaller level, I started to investigate the idea of the Sabbath and the idea of what it might look like to have an intentional day where you're focusing on rest and remembrance and investing in family and disconnecting completely from work, which eventually became a digital Sabbath, which I wrote about in my book when technology became an integral part of what it meant to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the smaller levels, I started to build in patterns, better patterns of exercise, better patterns of self-care. Like I have a massage every 6 weeks, and that's helped me with my, I know it's hardcore, isn't it? And patterns where I pray, I read scripture in the morning, and where we have time with people as well. I have a weekly meal with friends who I live in community with, and I've been doing that for more than a decade as well. So trying to build in patterns around rest and relationship and deep thought. And they've been really valuable over time.
Wow, that sounds beautiful. It reminded me a little bit of, I'm just finished reading a book by Dr. Caroline Leaf, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. And she talks about, she doesn't call it deep thinking, but she talked about brain building, but it sounds similar to your deep thinking. And that's part of it, because there's different pattern to go through to get to that deep thinking. You think about it, the first thing, and then I reworded it to make myself understand it, because she used a lot of science words, because she's a brilliant neuroscientist and I'm not a scientist. It was like to contemplate, to consider, to contemplate, to conceptualize, to circle back again, and then to carry it out. It's like you go a little bit deeper with each thing. And it sounds like that's what you're doing on your retreats that you do, and just seeking to do that deeper part of who you are. Because one of the things you had shared is during this whole process you went through, that you discovered more of who you are. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think discovering more of who you are is definitely a lifetime journey. I mean, I'm 44 now, so I'm obviously in a different age group than I was. Someone once said, a friend of mine, Alan Hirsch, said, you spend the first 40 years of your life trying to try out different puzzle pieces and work out what should be your puzzle. And then you spend the next kind of 20, 30 years or more putting the puzzle together. It's that idea that you try lots when you're young, and then you start focusing when you're in your middle ages. And I certainly see that happening in my life. That didn't answer your question. So the question is,
no, but that was very interesting.
What did I discover about myself? I suppose what I'm trying to say is I'm still discovering who I am. But I think and I concluded this in the book, actually, I've always wrestled with space. So, Richard Bach says, I teach best what I most need to learn. And I think the reason I can write a book about how to make space is because I've wrestled with it for more than 20, 30 years, because I love work. I love starting new things. I love being active. And yet I also love my family, and I believe in self-help and community and spirituality and silence and solitude. So how do you put that together? And so I learned
how you had said a little earlier about, I don't remember exactly how you put it, but about creating space in the clutter of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, life is cluttered, and there's more than we can possibly do each day.
You made it sound just so natural, the clutter of life. And it's so true. It's so true. We don't think of it as cluttered, though. So we need that space.
And especially digital clutter. I mean, we haven't even got there yet, but life has been cluttered for a long time. Yeah, but it just keeps getting more cluttered. And the analogy we'll go back to the question, but the analogy I use when I'm training people is I will pour water into a glass, and I will keep pouring until it overflows, and then I'll keep pouring until it starts falling down the table and then onto the floor, and everyone starts to feel uncomfortable, especially the OCD people in the room. However, my description is that we only have a finite capacity. Like you said, there's one Daniel, right? We have a finite amount of energy and time, and if that represents our life, the time we have each day or each week, the water represents the actual stuff that is bombarding us, the options we have in a Western culture, the digital options, the school drop-offs and pickups, and the to-do lists, and the sleep we need to have, and the physical exercise we're meant to do. Like, there's more than we will ever do.
I already feel tired from you saying that.
Exactly. But that's the reality of life. And actually, I see no change. I cannot see a situation in the next 10 years where there's less clutter or there's less water pouring into our glass, and where we can fill up our glass and have everything kind of organized. So if that's the case, the only option we have is to let culture and life kind of take over what we do, or to say, I'm just going to choose what goes in first. And for me, those rhythms and patterns are a way of saying rest comes before work, family and relationships, community comes before work. And the ability to think deeply and to have contemplative time to address the inner life comes first. They go on my calendar. They're part of my schedule. Nothing like they're sacrosanct. And then all the other stuff that flows in, whether it be the Netflix episodes I want to watch, or the books I want to read, or the things I have to do for clients, that has to then come in with the space that's left. But what was happening before is I just let everything else flow in first, and the stuff that fell out was really important, and I ended up burning out. So it's an intentional choice to fill your cup first with what really matters. And that's what it means to make
similar
space.
to the 7 habits of highly effective people. In there, he talks about a container with rocks, and you put the big rocks in, and then the next size rocks, and the next size rocks, till you get to the sand.
Definitely. And the only difference, he wrote, so Stephen Covey wrote that in the early 90s, from my understanding. And he described it as if you put in the big rocks first and the most important things, like I described, well, then you can put in the smaller rocks and the sand, and not so much falls out. And I think he was right. But the difference now is, and Oliver Burkeman actually in 4,000 Weeks wrote a great book a few years ago. He said that nowadays you actually can't even fit the big rocks in. So we're now having to make decisions about which big rock we put in, because there's just so little capacity and so much we're asked to do. And so in an environment where the rocks are just getting bigger and bigger and there's more and more stuff, it just becomes even more important to ruthlessly prioritize, and to be able to set boundaries on your time, and to just know when enough is enough. Same principle, but just a slightly different context.
Right. And really focusing on what you focus on is focusing on your principles, your priorities, and getting serious about what does really matter to you, which requires space to do that.
Yeah.
You have to take space to find out what space you want. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's the irony, isn't it? Most people don't have enough space. So deep thought and contemplation is one of the habits I value a lot, because I think if you don't take time to think about who you are, what you value, for me, it's if I'm not listening to the Spirit of God and gaining discernment in where I'm meant to head and how to make hard choices, then I don't have the moral conviction or the guidance to say no to the cultural pressures around me. And there are so many things that consumer culture say, you must do this, you must look like this, you must act like this. And if you don't have time to think your own thoughts rather than someone else's thoughts, you end up living another person's script, and it's usually not the script that you're meant to live. And so if you want to live an intentional life and to live the life that you're meant to live, rather than the one that the shareholders of Silicon Valley tech companies want you to live, well, then you need to actually carve out space to reflect on your inner life and to understand who you are and where you're heading, because you simply can't hear the voice of God. You can't hear your soul when you're scrolling Instagram. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. So true. But there's 2 words that you use to create space. And I really want to make sure that you get a chance to speak to those. You use the word beauty and wonder in creating space. Will you talk about that?
Yeah, for me, space is partly about creativity and beauty and wonder. I when I speak at, let's say, in a faith community, I use similar words, but I'd say that in heaven, there when things are perfect, when heaven comes to earth, there won't be clutter, there won't be email notifications and endless scrolling. There won't, like, I guarantee there won't be infinity scrolling in heaven, and we're not going to have an endless to-do list where we're running to stand still and can never breathe. I think there'll be really meaningful work and important relationships, but it will be different. And therefore, and for me, that means that's about space. There will be space to think and rest and wonder and imagine and dream and create, to love people deeply and to not feel rushed. And if that's what heaven will be like, well, then, in my understanding of Jesus, he says that's what the earth needs to be like, and that's our role to bring about heaven on earth, as on earth as it is in heaven, he prays. So for me, space making is actually drawing the future into the present and seeking to experience the joy and wonder and mystery and spirituality of the time to come into this age here and now. So that's how I express it from a faith perspective when I'm speaking to people who who see the world in that way.
Well, that does sound very beautiful and very peaceful and very enjoyable. And so those words are very emotional if someone would pause to think about the word wonder and beauty. They taste like chocolate.
Without being bad for you.
Yeah, and they're not bad for you, but they have that some people don't like chocolate. For those of you who don't like chocolate, I'm sorry. Come up with something you think tastes wonderful to you. It was just the first thing that I thought of was, wow, like chocolate or something. What's your favorite dessert? Just beauty and wonder. They're marvelous. They're just marvelous words. I love those words.
And I think it links to the playfulness that I talked about before. I think in our rational, busy workplace society, we have lost the wonder. And wonder, when you look at the stars, it's a classic. You look at the stars and you actually think about how small we are on Earth compared to the billions of planets around us. Like, it's mind-boggling. And Rabbi Abraham Heschel writes a beautiful book on wonder called God in Search of Man. And he talks about how wonder, both connects us with the big, but it connects us with the small. And there is a sense of finding confidence and strength in who you are when you surrender to the hugeness of the world and how small you are. There's this paradox that when you know how small and insignificant you are, you can also somehow experience significance. And so, we need space to wonder, and it's worth pursuing because we're spiritual beings. And if we lose the sense of playfulness and wonder and joy and the impossibility, the creativity, the texture of not knowing, well, then I think we become less than we could be as humans. Yeah.
Wonder is, I think, very important. I had read an article a few years back. There was about Sunday school and how they were messing things up. I don't remember the title of it, but the point that I got from the article was how much wonder was missing from that. It became about rules and regulations and do this and do that and don't do this and, memorize this and know this story. And it was all just stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't filled with wonder. And humanity is filled with wonder. Our world is filled with wonder. God is filled with wonder. And like just watching a caterpillar turn into a butterfly, or watching one walk along the ground, or, when you watch a baby discover their hands. There is so much wonder if we will take a moment to see it. And then it changes us on the inside when we have that space, because wonder is beautiful. So thank you for those two words. I just said I didn't expect to go off on all of that with those two words, but I think they're powerful, and they speak to people, wonder and beauty. So tell us about your book. Do you have a copy of your book with you to hold up? Tell us the title of your book and the subtitle.
I do. There we are. Lots of little blue dots with technological things there, with Spacemaker in the middle, trying to carve out the space. So the book is a manifesto about helping people to rethink their relationship with the online world, recognizing that space is incredibly precious. And yet most of us have very little space in our lives, particularly since the digital explosion, let's say 10, 15 years ago. And a lot of the space that's taken up in our lives is actually because of digital clutter, not just even everyday clutter. And if we don't rethink our paradigm, our beliefs about technology, and then reorientate our patterns. So I talk a lot about patterns around true north principles. How do we actually orientate our worldview and our life around healthy patterns and principles? Well, then you can't establish the last bit, which is the digital practices of unplugging and unwinding to think clearly and restfully. So I take people on a journey to change their mindset, their beliefs about technology, and why technology has kind of hooked us in an unhealthy way. In terms of overuse. So I'm not rejecting tech, but I'm talking about
I
when
know
we allow
we're
it to
using
take
it
too
right
much.
now. So
Exactly, yeah. My whole life is involved with tech, so I'm not anti-tech, but it's when you overuse it and you fill up your whole glass with tech, or you put it in first. How do you orientate the principles, and how do you end up with better practices? Yeah, so that and ultimately it's about helping you make space to think and rest and love those around you, to wonder, to breathe, to experience the fullness of humanity that we lose if we overfill our cup with too much tech.
yeah. What is the subtitle of your book?
How to unplug, unwind, and think clearly in the digital age.
Awesome. And then you also started the Spacemakers. You're the co-founder with that. What is that all about?
Oh, so look, Spacemakers is yes, it's the book is called Spacemaker, and I never intended to call it Spacemaker. And I wrestled with the book title for like years. It took me 7 years to write the book. So it's been a very long journey. But one day a friend of mine said, seriously, why don't you just call it Spacemaker? Because that's what it's about. I'm like, oh yeah, but my business has always been Spacemakers. So we do a few things. We help we provide training to help people make space by shifting the way they live and work. So practical habits of how do you get your inbox to zero? How do you run online to-do lists? How do you make priorities? How do you reestablish patterns in your life so that you can work effectively? So productivity skills, essentially, to make space. So they're the kind of habits of almost keeping pace in order to get stuff done and use technology really well. And then I teach people now the habits of making space, which are the opposite, kind of the counter habits of what I described, which are about unplugging and doing less and setting cadence in your life. And both of them are needed to meet in the middle and to become really, really productive as senior leaders or executives. So yeah, I train, I speak, and I write. That's what I do.
Oh, that's awesome. So how can people connect with you?
So I have a website, spacemakers.com.au. Yeah, check it out. I've got free chapters of my book. I've got guides on how to create a digital Sabbath if you're interested in actually exploring that idea more, and a blog as well. So it's all at spacemakers.com.au. I'd love a conversation if you want us to train your team.
That's awesome. Well, did we leave anything out? Anything you want to add to this? Like maybe something about kids and technology or something?
Oh, that's a big conversation. I've just written another book, Raising Tech Healthy Humans. It's not out yet. It's another few months, but around the idea of how do we help our children to become humans and to really experience humanity by helping them with healthy tech habits. I'm not sure I can give you a quick tip except for we should celebrate raising kids as humans, not just kind of, before we help them have too much tech.
Right. So when can we expect this book to come out?
November, before
Ooh,
Christmas.
so soon at least.
It's very soon. I'm excited. I'm in the editing phase, so I enjoy this part of the book launch. Yep.
Oh, so good. So I got to bring that up. I get to help promote your book then. Do you
Yeah,
have the
thank you.
title? What was the title of that book that's coming out?
I think it will be Raising Tech Healthy Humans. Yeah, and it will basically be how to make great decisions around tech habits for younger kids. We call them primary kids, so 5 to 12 years old. So the kind of pre-teens, tween stage. If you can set them up well for life with good tech habits, then I think they can be healthier humans when they're older. And so I want to help parents practically do that.
It sounds like what you're doing is what's the way to put it? You're trying to burnout proof them.
I don't know. In some ways,
maybe
I'm trying
proof
to give
is
them,
too strong of a word, but
I'm trying to give them
them.
inoculate. Maybe I'm trying to help parents give kids a reference point for life in its breadth and depth and wonder beyond screens, so that if they become completely obsessed and burnt out and addicted and so online that they can never turn off, they will at least remember a time when they walked on the beach and they experienced fresh air, where they had meals with real friends without having to photograph it, and where they could experience the joy of being human. Because if they have that reference point from a neurological and spiritual perspective, they can return to it. But if they never had that, if they only knew Minecraft and only knew life inside, well, then it's very hard to work out when they end up burnt out or anxious like me. Where do you go? Because you have no memory of a life when you were really deeply human. And so that's actually my heartbeat. Yeah. So in some ways, yeah,
Wow.
maybe not future proof, but to help with future burnout.
Will it be available in audio?
Yeah. Probably, if I don't burn out getting there.
Well, don't burn out getting there.
I won't
Take a
burn out.
Sabbath and then do it.
It will be, I reckon it will be an audio in February, because I'm going to have a
Okay.
long summer, and then I'll record it again like I did with my last book.
Okay, so you're heading into summer there.
We are. Whoa,
Oh,
this is
we're
the
heading
time of
into
year
winter
for,
here.
I know. This is where we get excited.
We were doing that the opposite time. And you said you're Tasmania, that's real close to Antarctica.
Well, it's very far south compared
Oh,
to most places
still
in the
pretty
world.
far south. My nephew's in Antarctica right now. He does
Yeah.
weather stuff down there. So
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, we don't have blizzards and snow in that sense, but we're quite temperate. It's a beautiful place to live, and a beautiful summer.
oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for being with us today. There's so much to think about. It's like I want to go back and talk about it all again, because it's so deep. And it's beautiful. So thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me on the show, Danielle. I appreciate it.
And for all of you here, check out Daniel's book, check out his website, so you can not burn out and be ready for when that new book comes out for your teenagers, your preteens. I'm going to be on the lookout for that for my grandkids. Thank you for being with us today. Until next time, I love you.